This is The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Over our 12-episode season, I will share some of my best sweater knitting techniques with you while we knit a sweater together. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 9. Oh, I've almost run out of fingers to hold up. I'm very excited today to talk to you about the bind-off and about getting to the point where we are not finishing the sweater, but we're finishing the knitting. So I hope you've had fun. I hope you are caught up. If you're not, though, that's okay, because I have to tell you something. I'm not caught up either. Through the magic of video editing, when you see some close-ups later on of binding off, I will be caught up. But right now, I'm still working on the decreases. But as you can see, turning my 2D pieces of fabric into a 3-dimensional knitted object that will fit on my body and will look a lot like the solstice that Jane is wearing. So you can also see, you can probably see a little line here of where, so I blocked the body and sleeves, and so that fabric is a little smoother than what I've knit recently. So I'm working my way through the decreases. I'm having so much fun. I finished my V-neck decreases and am now not decreasing here by the button bands. Well, actually now we're getting closer to being the collar, and only decreasing for the raglan lines at the shoulder on the front and back. And we have 4 decrease points for our raglan lines, and we're decreasing 2 stitches at each of those. So now I'm at the point where I'm decreasing 8 stitches every right side row. And I'm gonna keep going until I get to the final number of stitches in the pattern. And then I will start doing the actual top of the collar. I'm gonna spin Jane around here so you can really see it. The back of the neck, it's just garter stitch. It's very simple. The one little thing that you may have noticed in the pattern is I have you do some decreases here at the end in garter stitch. And that's so you don't end up with sort of little ears or a little squared off spot here for the collar where the front meets the back of the neck. So it sort of creates a little nice angle, smooths everything out and makes it really tidy. So that's what we're working on now. But I wanted to reassure you that if you aren't ready to bind off with me yet, that's okay. This isn't a contest. The videos on YouTube and the audio podcasts on iTunes will be there as long as those things are around. I have no plans to take them down, so you'll always be able to refer back to them. And if you want to knit another solstice cardie, you can just come back and watch them all again, listen to them all again. The only thing you won't be able to get after March 25th is a free copy of the pattern. After March 25th, the pattern will go into my Ravelry shop and you'll be able to purchase a copy there and store it in your Ravelry library. And if you're a subscriber, you will get a coupon from me on March 25th to purchase the pattern to have in your Ravelry library for a substantial discount, because you've gone with me through this entire journey. It's been a lot of fun and I want to thank you. But if you want to keep it in your Ravelry library, that's cool. I'll give you a coupon, you'll purchase it. If you don't and you just want to have the copy that you downloaded already, that's fine too. But the final Ravelry library version will be available online in the Ravelry shop on March 25th. So looking forward to when this season ends, I've started thinking about another season. But each season is a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy myself immensely, but I wanted to let you know that my plan is to not do a season until the beginning of May. And so for about a month, I'm going to offer some other stuff that I thought you might enjoy, and I'll share maybe some designer chats, little video and audio walkthroughs of other patterns of mine. So if there's a pattern you'd like me to put on Jane, point at, talk about, feel free to let me know. And otherwise, you'll keep getting your notifications. You'll keep hearing from me every week for those episodes, and then we'll start in May on a new pattern. And tentatively, the plan is for it to be a pullover called the Purly Pullover. And it's got some neat tips and tricks, different ways of thinking about knitting, but it's pretty straightforward. And we'll start that in May. But you'll get plenty of more information about that before before we get ready to do that. So if you're interested, you can get the yarn and all that good stuff. And it'll be the same sort of format, 12 weeks. We'll go through the various steps of knitting together. Some of it you'll know by now if you've been following along with me. Other things hopefully will be new and interesting for you. And of course, again, you'll get a link to download a copy of the free pattern, and it'll work that same way. So those are my plans for the future. But for now, I'm thinking about finishing up my decreases and getting ready to bind off. So Elizabeth Zimmerman was a huge fan of garter stitch and did all sorts of wonderful, amazing things with it, like the baby surprise jacket. And but one of the things she talks about is the difference between, of course, stockinette and garter stitch, and the reason that stockinette stitch curls. And that's that the stitches in stockinette are wider than they are tall, and that tends to pull the fabric in or over. But one of the things she taught me is to use that to your advantage. So when I bind off at the top of my cardigan, I'm going to bind off in purl. And the thing about that is, if you're working in garter stitch and you bind off in purl on the right side, it will actually pull the bind off row, it sort of flips it towards the back of the work. And then your bind off is actually kind of hidden, which is pretty cool, so that you just see garter stitch here. So basically, to bind off in purl, you just purl the stitches as you, instead of knitting them, and lift them over, and you'll discover it's almost exactly the same. But if you were taught that binding off was only done with the knit stitch, then hopefully this will be a new and interesting way to bind off for you. And it really does make a difference. It's fine if you bind off and knit. There's nothing wrong with that. You'll kind of see the bind off edge, but you can consider it decorative. It's, you know, it kind of goes along with those slip stitches that we did at the fronts. It sort of has a little bit of a chain effect, but I like the idea of hiding the bind off, and it matches the cuffs and the hem a little better. But either way, it looks great. And I just think it's one of those neat things about knitting, that we are using something that is sometimes considered a disadvantage, that the purl rows kind of make it twist, or not twist, but curl. But we're using that to our advantage, and we're curling the bind off row to the back of the work. So it'll be tucked away. So I still have a little bit more to go, but of course, when you see me in a moment, or you see my hands, I will be binding off in purl for you. So I still have to do, like I said, I have to finish up the raglan decreases. And when I do, one way you'll know that you're close, rather than counting stitches every row, is that you will end up with very few stitches. I think it depends on each size, but you will end up with just a few stitches at the top of your sleeve, because we will have shaped that sleeve up onto the shoulder, which is one of my favorite parts. So, were you a little surprised that I recommended binding off purlwise? Some knitters don't even realize you can do more than bind off knitwise. So I'm going to show you how to bind off purlwise. You basically purl instead of knit, and lift the stitches over and off in the same way. Now, the reason I recommend a straightforward, plain old bind off is that basically the stitches we're binding off are at the back of the neck, and we want that fabric to be relatively firm. So I wouldn't want to use a stretchier bind off in this instance. And let me just make my way across the stitches, so you can see what it looks like. Whew, there we go. And luckily there aren't too many stitches here, so if you wanted to experiment and see what bind offs work for you, you could certainly try that. Here we go, and you can see the purled stitches. By purling, we actually bring the bind off edge to the back of the work. And so we'll just have this really smooth knit stitch garter stitch, I should say, on the front. One last bit of advice on the bind off is to not bind off the last stitch. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we get there. Just a few more stitches to go. But as you can see, it's basically just doing purls instead of knits. And you can also, of course, do a knit one, purl one bind off, and that's great because then we the knit one, purl one causes the stitches to go back and forth. When you have all purl or all knit, the stitches tend to sort of roll over to one side or the other. So if you want a bind off that sort of stands up, that's a great time to use a knit one, purl one bind off, even if you didn't create a knit one, purl one fabric like with ribbing or seed stitch. So I'm almost at the end. A few more stitches to go. And you'll see that on the last stitch, if I bind it off, I'm basically sort of creating another row. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that little ear. So we now are at the last stitch, and I still will purl it. But instead of pulling, instead of pulling the tail through that stitch, I'm going to break the yarn and pull through there. And that gives us a much smoother finish. So there you can see the purl row has curved towards the inside of the work. And now let me show you. I went back and did a knit bind off on my swatch, just so I could show you the difference. And so here, the bind off rolls towards the front a little. And there's nothing wrong with that. You may like the way that looks better. But here's the difference. So the swatch is in the front, and then the collar of my sweater here in the back. And you can see that the bind off edge is hidden on the inside. And so next week, my plan is to talk a little bit more about finishing work. We've already talked about buttons quite a bit. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you're going on your very own button hunt. And next week we have to think about weaving together the underarms and then seaming up the sleeves. And luckily they're a short seam, but you still have to sew them up, otherwise you would end up with just sort of flappy bits, right? So, and then of course the last thing is weaving in ends and thinking about the best way to do that for your sweater. So I hope that answers your questions about the bind off. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always contact me. At Kathleen Dames on Twitter is a great way to reach me if your question is short. Otherwise, post your question in the forum on Ravelry. And that's in my Kathleen Dames design group. If you are having trouble finding me, just go to kathleendames.com/thesweater and all the links you'll need will be right there. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope your finishing up of your sweater, knitting part anyway, is going well. And I will be back next week. We'll talk about the finishing work that goes in once you're done with the knitting part. And we're getting so close to wearing our new sweaters, yay! I have to tell you, I'm getting a little jealous of Jane wearing her solstice all the time. So I'm getting really excited to finish up mine and wear it. So thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, happy knitting. Bye! This is season 1 of The Sweater, and we are knitting the solstice cardi together. Many thanks to Karen at Roundtable Yarns, Natalie at Remembrances Pottery, Corinna at Picnic Knits, Tara Swiger and my fellow Starship captains, and you for being part of this knitting adventure. Don't forget to visit kathleendames.com/thesweater to sign up for the newsletter before March 25th and get your free copy of the Solstice Cardi pattern in the welcome email. Is it after March 25th? Purchase your copy of the Solstice Cardi from my Ravelry shop. And be sure to share your project on social media using the hashtags KDSweater and Solstice Cardi. Questions? Comments? Just want to share your progress? Visit the Kathleen Dames Design Ravelry forum for support and camaraderie. Thanks so much for joining me, and happy knitting!